was in a system. And when I left law because I was in a system and I felt trapped by a system. And I played with the system, and I didn't see any type of like real way that I could further the system if I was in it and at the bottom of the totem pole. And I just felt like this was law version 2.0.
Dr. Shelly Ann Gajadhar is an educator and high performance coach with a PhD in management research from King's College London. Hailing from Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Gajadhar began her career in law before transitioning to business and mindful leadership. Today, she's the founder of a women's mentorship community called the Go Bravely Mentorship Community, named after her life motto, Go Bravely. In this episode, Dr. Gajadhar will delve into her academic and professional experiences and guide us through her transformational journey to be a high-achieving woman who still enjoys the soft life. She encourages us all to go bravely and muster the courage to create a life of our own during the doctoral degree and beyond. We'll explore the barriers she faced as a Black woman PhD student in the UK and her tireless advocacy for diversity and inclusion at her school. Discover how she found the perfect university program for her interests, secured a full scholarship, and conquered microaggressions and isolation along the way. Let's get into our conversation. Welcome to the Cohort Sisters podcast, Dr. Shelly Ann Gajadhar. I have to first and foremost congratulate you on the new addition to your family. Congratulations on becoming a first-time mama. You know, that is in and of itself an accomplishment on top of all the other amazing things that you're doing. So I would love to congratulate you there.
Oh, thank you so much. And congratulations to you too on your second bundle of joy.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So would love to just get to know you a little bit more. Feel free to let us know, who you are, where you're from, a little bit about who Shelly Ann is outside of the doctor. And we're going to get to the doctor, but would love to just get to know you and where you're from, where you currently live, and just a little bit about kind of like your hobbies and anything else you'd like to
Yes.
share.
Perfect. So thank you so much for having me and holding space with me. So you would probably hear the accent. I am a Caribbean woman from Trinidad and Tobago, born and bred there. I currently reside in Atlanta with my husband and my beautiful baby. And I am a brave woman. I am a woman that is very dedicated to furthering the mission and the self actualization of women, particularly high performing aspirational women. In terms of the things that I really deeply enjoy, I deeply enjoy holding space with others, helping others feel seen, and research. Like, I'm a deep lover of books, I'm a deep lover of research, and I've used that to really create a life that I can actually say is my ideal life, and a table where I coach and I consult with others, and kind of breaking free from working in a 9 to 5 and working within institutions, and more doing so on my own terms.
I resonate with all that. Yes, girl, do it on our own terms. That is the
Yes.
name of the game. This life will not drag us down. We have to make it what we want it to be. So I already know you've already had you as a speaker in Cohort Sisters and
Yeah.
absolutely love the work that you do, the coaching
Thank
that you
you.
provide. We're definitely going to link the recording to the past workshop that you've done with
Yeah.
us in the show notes so that folks can get a little bit of just a little bit of a sneak peek of the
Yes.
amazing work that you do through
Thank
all the
you.
work that you do with Alpha Institute.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the doctoral degree. So what is your
Yes.
doctoral degree in, from what school, and what did you research?
Great. So I'll try to make this bite-sized as possible, because we all know that we can get a bit lengthy with this. So to keep it simple, my doctorate is focused on PhD in management research. I'm just going to put it as that, PhD in management research. I graduated from King's College London. I graduated in 2021. I crossed the stage in 2022. I actually submitted in 2020. But then we had
Wow.
COVID, and
Yeah.
so many things were just put on hold. So I was only able to finally graduate and like really walk across the stage in 2022. My focus in my PhD research was on the Triple Helix Model. And for those of you who don't know what that is where we focus on partnerships that include universities, industry, and government. We see a lot in the space of business that more universities are collaborating with industry, and government is noticing this by seeing the universities as a very important stakeholder to regulation, to innovation in particular, and also to the way that we do business. I was interested in this topic because I came from a background of law, and I just felt like, we as researchers are people that occupy a very hybrid space. We can do so many things, and we're not necessarily stuck in just one kind of arena. And I decided to kind of look at how are academics really crossing knowledge bridges and creating a bit more of a legacy when it comes to intellectual autonomy, and venturing outside of the university to do that. So that's how I came up with that research.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. I'm kind of curious about, you mentioned a law background. So I
Yes.
feel like we got to start there.
Yes.
When you pursued law, did you think about practicing law? Like, talk to us
Yeah.
about the law educational background
Yes.
to management, business management, PhD, because those
Right.
seem, I mean, you explained it a little bit, but they still seem a little different. So
Oh,
I'm curious
yes.
about the thought process.
Yeah. So my first professional stint was in law, and it wasn't really a stint. I spent 4 years as a practicing attorney. I was a criminal prosecutor, so I practiced criminal law for 4 years. I worked for the government of Trinidad and Tobago, which is where I'm from. I prosecuted predominantly murders. I did that Monday to Friday, every single day. Sometimes I'll have 8 cases at once. Yep, there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to crime and criminal prosecution in the Caribbean. I did that for 4 years, and then life situations happened. I basically lost my mentor at the time, who was also a criminal attorney. I lost her very unexpectedly and very violently. She was assassinated. And that is what pivoted my entire career. I decided I no longer wanted to be in a profession where I did not see a future for myself. And I started over. And starting over means that I no longer wanted to be in the field of law, but I knew that I loved research. I was always very good at research. When it came to legal submissions to a judge, my research was spot on. And I said, you know what, I will take that love for research and I'd go and do my master's in business. You can't go wrong with a business degree, right? So I said, okay, let me do my master's in business. When I did my master's in business, I went to Edinburgh, Scotland to do that. And I did a really great thesis, which ended up becoming a published piece of work. And
Yeah.
when I realized that, oh my God, I could be published in a 4-star journal, I realized you're onto something. Research is your thing. You enjoy it. You can do it for long hours. And I think the next plausible and kind of expected step was then a PhD. And I was really excited about going into a PhD. So my love of research is what, and of course, my career pivot is what then moved me into business and academia.
Yeah, thanks for so much for sharing about that
You're
journey.
welcome.
So you mentioned a master's degree in Scotland, you did your PhD in London, you now live in the US. You have been nearly all over the world. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences as an international student and doing training in Trinidad and Tobago, doing training in Europe, and then now living in the US and building your business and excuse me, building your business and building your life here. Can you just talk about some of the intricacies that you've observed along the way? Did anything kind of stand out in terms of being educated in the Caribbean versus being educated in Europe versus working and living in the US now?
Yeah, so I would say firstly that as a Caribbean woman, and shout out to my Caribbean people, but as a Caribbean woman, I think, coming from a small island, I mean, we have 1.2, 1.4 million people back home. And I would say that when you come from a small island, you really have a resilience factor. It's like you know how to make something out of nothing. And it's because we just learn how to do that because that's a form of survival for us. So for me, when I was going to school and growing up in the Caribbean, it was really about how can I make something out of nothing? How can I use everything that I have and be resourceful? How can I be innovative even if I didn't feel innovative? How can I see beyond the waters and see beyond the shore that I was on? How can I dream big? So for me, being a Caribbean woman, growing up in the Caribbean, I was always challenged to again, just do what you can with all that you have available to you. So that was the first thing. I then took that character and that character piece and I really implemented that when I went over to Scotland. Now, Scotland, I've never been there before. I knew no one. I literally took my savings and I just left because I was ready to start over. And the ability, again, to just make something out of nothing really saved me in that time when I was in Edinburgh. It taught me how to dive deep into a field that I knew nothing about. I mean, I had years of experience in law, zero experience in business. But I just believed that, I could make something really good out of this. So I trusted myself, I trusted my gifts, and I really became a sponge, really immersing myself in the experience and learning as much as I can. And then being able to take up space in Edinburgh, that then led me into my PhD in a big city like London. So when I got to London, I was already very confident because I made it in Edinburgh. I got my thesis published in a 4-star journal, and I just had all of the confidence that was needed to maneuver a system that I would say on record is very elitist. I went to a Russell Group University, which is very similar to an Ivy League university in the US. And Russell Group universities, which are like the Oxfords and the Cambridge, they do not have very high representations of women of color, or even on senior leadership teams. You rarely see senior leaders that are of color or lecturers that are of color. So when I got into the PhD cohort, I was the only student of color doing a PhD. It was only until I started to advocate for diversity and inclusion is when, in the second and third year, is when I had more students of color. So with each step that I took in the different countries, it really prepared me for where I was going with my career and what was needed for me in that moment and in that season. And the biggest lesson that I've learned wherever I've gone is that you matter, your experience matters, your voice needs to be heard, and it's okay to trade in your likability for your authenticity. And if I can tell anybody that who's listening, don't be afraid to trade in your likability just so that you can authentically speak your truth, because as a woman of color in academia, it is so very needed and we need to see it and hear it.
Yeah, wow, that is such a powerful little, write it on your Post-it note, put it on your laptop. You don't trade your likability for authenticity. I absolutely love that. And I think that, when you think about being one of the few, one of the only, and all the pressures that comes with, the pressure to not only work to represent ourselves well, but to represent all of us collectively well, it can lead to people kind of, feeling small or kind of keeping their thoughts and ideas to themselves, not to ruffle any feathers in the goal or with the goal of being likable. And so I love the sentiment of, screw being likable. Make sure that you're bringing your authentic self, because that is what is going to continue to make you feel like you can continue in the program, is being yourself. So that's such great suggestions, such a good piece of advice. Why King's College London? I know, it's a Ivy League comparable school, but as you were thinking about where to study. What was it about that specific doctoral program that stood out to you? Were there mentors, faculty advisors in that program that were interesting? How did you know that it was the right choice for you?
Yeah, so great question. And I think, when you're focusing on where you should really nest for your PhD program, it comes down to who you want to work with, because a large part, I mean, all of the PhD experience really is who your supervisor is and how are they going to support you along the way. So for me, when I was choosing a school, it really came down to, is the subject expert or somebody as good as the subject expert there? And I remembered when I was looking at schools, the good thing is the subject experts was at King's. And not only was the subject expert at King's, but King's already had a very big reputation for creating innovation in the space of healthcare. And I was looking at healthcare as my context because universities really contribute to innovation through healthcare. So when I saw that they already had an ecosystem and a network within the industry, and they had the subject expert in the field, it was a no-brainer for me almost, So that's how I went ahead and chose the person. And of course, speaking to other students as well, what was their experience like working with that supervisor? What was their experience working within the cohort? And all the reviews were really positive. And to me, it was like, this is it. This is definitely
Nice.
it. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So, talk to us a little bit about the journey during the program. What were some of the successes, the high points, and then also what were some of the challenges? If you could recall just like one or two successes and one or two challenges that you
Yeah.
faced throughout the journey.
Yeah. So I would say the one of the biggest high points for me in my PhD journey is finally being seen and feeling seen as a Black minority PhD student that really wanted to be a lecturer. I remember when I got into the program and those first few weeks, let alone few months, I felt extremely out of my league. When I looked at all of the lecturers, not one of them looked like me. When I looked at the students, no one looked like me. The pictures within the university halls, the spotlights, it did not represent what I looked like. And I really felt like I needed to do something about this because I have 3 to 4 years here, right? So no one wants to walk through hallways that just don't feel like you belong. So to me, my first big success was really challenging and advocating for more diversity and inclusion to be seen, and that led to the business school actually erecting pillars on every floor of the business school, which spotlighted minorities and persons of color. And I was one of them included. I have a huge picture of me
Oh
standing
my
next to my
gosh.
picture right on the floor where my room was for my PhD cohort. And finally, I just felt like, yes, I am seen. And not just me, but so many other people. So that was like a huge monumental moment for me. To this day, the pillar is still up, my face is still there, and so many others. And it's just testimony of what can happen, what can really happen for us when we advocate for our cause. Sometimes it's your only cause, but it's so many others as well, too, that are not saying anything. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing was, doing so well, working so well in my first year, that I ended up with a full scholarship for my PhD. When I went in,
Yes.
yes, when I went in, I had a partial scholarship. I did not have a full scholarship, and I was going to fund the rest on my own. Mind you, ladies and gentlemen, this is pounds, right? It's pounds. And I remembered I did so much of good work from being on so many committees, helping the school with so many initiatives, driving the conversation of diversity and inclusion, that there comes a point where your voice can no longer be ignored. Your presence can no longer be ignored. And I remember when I got the letter from the PhD program manager, I cried so hard because I was literally saving every penny I had to be able to fund this PhD. So when they gave me that full scholarship, that was just another moment of,
Yeah.
again, so important to advocate for you.
Mhm.
Challenges was always always having to deal with microaggressions, and I think this isn't talked enough about, but there are very subtle microaggressions, particularly in the UK context. It's like they call it banter, so it's like little condescending remarks that might be made and everybody kind of laugh it off and stuff, but it is microaggressions, and it happens a lot in very formal settings, so it becomes hard to address it because you're in a formal setting.
Mhm.
So that was the first one, navigating microaggressions and really saying no to things when I feel like it's a breach or it's disrespectful. And the second challenge, I would say, is understanding that I would not come out with a bunch of friends at the end of my
Mhm.
program. And I think
Mhm.
that's, again, something that isn't talked about enough. Sometimes we think, oh, well, we're in this program, everyone is doing the same thing. I'm going to leave here with 5, 6, 7 friends. I left with one. I left with one friend. And why? Because the PhD journey is so isolating. It's very hard to find people that you can connect with, and to connect with for so long. You
Mhm.
change,
Yeah.
you get in there very excited, and then by your third, fourth year, you've changed. So to
Mhm.
me, it was just accepting that it's okay that this journey is going to be
Mhm.
isolated, and it's okay to just have small but very meaningful friendship
Mhm.
groups.
Yeah. Wow, that's actually such a good point. It's something that I haven't thought about for myself because you're right. I think the general progress of doctoral programs, you're in your coursework, so everyone is seeing each other regularly, especially if you started a program in a cohort model where a bunch of you started at the same time. But once you go off and do your own research, it's so hard to maintain those relationships.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm not now thinking like, oh, like how many friends did I come out of after like the 8 years I spent or 7 years I spent in my PhD program? That's so real. I don't know if people often, I don't know if I've heard someone say that they want to go get a doctoral degree as a way to get friends. I don't think anybody's trying to do that, but
Please.
it is still good to know, right? Like that's the wrong thing to do. But it is good to know that you might not come out with that many friends, and not to say that you're doing anything wrong. That's really just the nature of the way that doctoral programs are shaped. They are very much an individual enterprise. You're doing your research independently. You might have some input from your advisors here and there, but once you're beyond coursework, you have to be really intentional about creating relationships with other students in your program.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the success of getting going from a partial scholarship to a full scholarship, girl, I love that for you. But I also don't want the people thinking that if
Thank
they
you.
are doing all of the departmental
Yeah.
labor of organizing and advocating, that all of a sudden they're going to get funding, because I feel like that's not
Yeah,
that's
that's
not
not the
always the
case.
reality.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think I want people to take away from that story that your funding can change. And so
Yes.
whether that means that you need to be intentional about forming relationships with faculty who do have money, if you are only partially funded or not funded at all, just because you don't have funding in one year, that doesn't mean that you can't have funding in a subsequent year. But I also don't want folks to like now just start doing all sorts of additional unpaid service labor, especially for these organizations or rather
Yes.
institutions who fundamentally like don't care, because some of them
Yes.
say they care on paper and some of them really just like are never going to change. So I just don't want folks like thinking that if they now
No,
start
I
organizing
100% agree.
that
Yeah,
they'll get a
because
full
sometimes
scholarship.
sometimes the universities also expect for you to take initiatives which should be on the agenda of the
Yeah.
university on your shoulders. And I could talk more
Hmm.
about that later.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's very important that if you are doing the extra work, it's because you do it for you first. Do it for
Right.
you first,
Right.
because that's where the joy is.
Yeah.
And everything else comes second. And if you feel
Hmm.
like, you know what, this is a job, then you should be fairly compensated.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Double time.
Double time.
Um,
Yes.
so I want to talk about your progression into your post-doctoral career journey,
Yes,
you mentioned a little bit earlier that you envisioned yourself as a lecturer initially. So
yes,
at what point did that change for you? You're currently not a lecturer in the traditional sense. You do
yeah.
educate in your own individual way, which I'd love for you to kind of talk about that as well. But would love to know, like, at what point did you either during the program or shortly after the program, realize actually I want to do things a little bit differently? Can you just speak to how your postdoctoral career emerged?
Yeah, that's a really good point of introspection for me because it happened in waves. It happened in waves. I don't think that there was just one thing that happened and I was like, okay, I definitely don't want to be here. I think it happened in waves. First wave was having to publish, the pressure of publishing, and publishing as often as possible. That was something that was always a concern for me. When we had symposiums, like our doctoral symposiums and stuff, conversations around publishing would come up, and I'd always feel just a little bit like uncomfortable with it. So that was the first kind of indication that I'm not sure if this might be the right fit. What also came up for me as well is recognizing that there was a particular type of rubric when it came to how we assess our students, what we teach our students. And I'm a huge believer in free thinking and giving students the opportunity to critically think for themselves as well. So, intellectual autonomy and that opportunity to really speak from a place of experience and speak from a place of authenticity, I felt was a bit compromised or sometimes completely in conflict with the way that we approach education. So that was a red flag for me as well. And then when COVID came along, at that time, I was writing up my PhD. And I recognized that education in itself is a very isolating journey, but it's also even more isolating when you don't have the physical element to it and the community around you. And it depends so very much on the community, the populace. What does it look like? The demographics of it. And I just felt like that is sometimes those are things out of our control as lecturers. We don't say the types of, we don't say, okay, we need these students because we are not enrolling them. That's the higher heads that do that. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, you can want a particular type of student profile or student demographic within your classroom, but you may not have that, right? Mm-hmm. So those were things that just kind of made me realize that I was in a system. Mm-hmm. And when I left law because I was in a system and I felt trapped by a system. And I played with the system and I didn't see any type of like real way that I could further the system if I was in it and at the bottom of the totem pole. And I just felt like this was law vision 2.0. And that's when I just said after COVID, after submitting my PhD, that's when I decided that I would pursue a different path, and that was entrepreneurship. At that time, I also would have given up an opportunity to lecture. And that's when really I decided to step boldly into entrepreneurship and create my own path as an educator.
Yeah. So that's such a great segue. Let's talk about that path.
Yes.
So I don't know if they'll be able to see this, but your name is showing up as Dr. Shelly Ann Gajadhar, Go
Yes.
Bravely. So talk to us about what Go Bravely is. What is this mentorship community? What is the educational and coaching work that you do?
Yeah. So I have a business, a coaching and consultancy business, which I actually started when I started my PhD. So I was in my first year of my PhD and I started my business, which is called Alpha Stute. And Alpha Stute is a coaching and consultancy which focuses specifically on high performance coaching, getting people to perform more optimally by using management strategies. This is why my PhD is in management, using management strategies. And also we focus on getting students into top universities, whether that's in the US or the UK. Now, when I decided to launch the business, it really was because I saw that there were so many people that were super smart and wanted to experience international education, but just did not know how to go about writing a university application, a personal statement, asking for scholarships or funding. And I mean, I went through it, right? So I said, this is a great way for me to use my experience and, pay it forward. In terms of go bravely really is a mantra that I live by, and it's the personification of who I am, right? Leaving everything that I know in law and recreating my identity and my life was a testimony of me going bravely into the unknown and into my ideal timeline. And through that mantra, I've been able to build my business. I've been able to create a women's mentorship community of 200 plus women from around the world. And every month, I teach a mentorship class focused on either career, business, or education. And I also have a healing circle at the end of each month where we just sit girl to girl and we talk about just the challenges that, women face, especially as aspirational women, high performing women, alpha females, women that want to take up space, not dim their light anymore. So this is where that work came in. And, just today I was saying how grateful I am to be able to take my PhD and to take the 15 years of academia that I have spent, and enjoyed, and really bring it into a forum where people can digest it and it tastes good and it's attractive and it feels accessible and it doesn't feel like they have to pay a pretty penny to be able to access the information. And we can talk and teach on non-traditional things, and people can choose how they want to be educated, and people could choose the topics they want to spend time on, so through my business, I've been able to really create more choice in how people approach education. And I mean, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, you're doing such amazing work. I am going to go completely off script right now
Yes.
because you use the term alpha female. I
Yes.
didn't realize that. Well, first of all, I said Alpha Institute before. It's not, it's Alpha Stute. My bad.
Alpha Stute. It's okay. It's okay. It's absolutely okay. But it is a
Yeah.
play. You're right. It's somewhat right because it is a play on the word Alpha Institute,
hmm
Alpha Astute. We just brought it together, slapped it together.
we love a
Yes.
good brand
Yes.
name.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm curious if you have seen any pushback? Because I know that there's been, I think, especially post COVID, a rise of a kind of narrative around like women moving away from the alpha, like independent woman identity, more into like the soft life, soft girl space. So I just want you to talk on that a little bit. Have you
Yeah.
kind of seen any pushback, whether in your community or outside of your community, or people being uncomfortable with this idea of being a high performing, high achieving woman,
Yes.
especially, in the light of you recently, not too long ago, got married, you just had a kid,
Yeah.
you're a business owner. I know I identify very strongly with a lot of those similar shared identities, but I
Yeah.
know that there are some women who feel like, especially Black women, who feel like, well, I'm doing all this high achieving, but I, can't find a partner, or the streets are the ghetto. So I'm just kind of curious if you kind of seen or heard any discussion around moving away from the alpha identity to more
Yes.
of the soft life identity.
Love
Hopefully that
this
question made
question. Yeah.
sense.
Oh, no, this question
Okay.
makes absolute sense. And it's a topic that we talk a lot about in my mentorship community with the ladies. One of the things that my mentees really talk about with me and commend me on is a very good handle and balance of masculine and feminine energy. And for those of you that don't really know about masculine and feminine energy is the doing energy, it's the actions energy, it's where the willpower is, it's where the to do, going out there and doing things. And the feminine energy is that soft life, it's that resting in your femininity, it's that feeling, moving with emotions. And for me, as an alpha female, I get questions a lot about, well, how do you balance these two, and can they even coexist? And my answer to that is absolutely 100% yes. You can have both, Just because I'm high performing does not mean that I'm not soft lifing either, right? So I would like to go on record and say I'm doing both. I am
Yes.
really going into my high performance and achieving all of my goals, but I am also resting in my feminine and creating that as a lifestyle, not just as a routine or not just as something that I aspire to, but actually as how I live my day to day. And because I have been able to live in that way, the life or my life is the testimony and it tells the tale. So in terms of pushback, no. I think what I've seen is a lot of people being inspired by how do you do it? One of the things that I recently shared on my social media is don't soft life yourself out of your goals. Integrate. I want to say that again. Don't soft life yourself out of your goals. Integrate. And that piece of integration is what I don't think we're seeing people teaching on. It's like you need to have one or the other. And we continuously
Right.
tell women this. You need to have you need to have children instead of your career. You need to have your career instead of your family. And I'm saying no. No, sis, you can have both. But you have to be okay with recognizing that when you have both, it's not going to be how you think it's going to be. And it's okay for some things to be sacrificed to find a balance that feels good to you. So soft lifing in my life, in my reality right now, may not look like being in a 5-star hotel or at a vacation spot every month. It can look like me in the backyard with my baby on the grass, chilling, blowing bubbles. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like we have to find what soft life means for us while we go after our dreams and our goals and don't feel like we have to pick one or the other.
Yeah. Love all of that, especially because we just like my idea of a good time recently is like buying a little thing for my son to use. I just like
Right?
bought him a little octopus pool last
Oh,
weekend, put him in the backyard, and I was just like,
love
this is
it.
happiness. Like, this is the life I
Come
want to
on
live.
now. This
That
is
is my
it.
soft life. So I love that
This is it.
reframing and this idea of it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both. And you
Yeah.
are definitely a testament of that. So I
Oh,
appreciate you
thank
leading by
you.
example and then teaching others as well.
Oh, thank
So
you.
would love to, as we start to wind down, would love to ask you one of two questions that we ask everyone that we have on the Coexist podcast. The first one is, what is one thing that you would do differently, if any, during your doctoral journey if you had to do it all over again?
Yeah. One thing that I would do differently, I would say, and I know that this may this may sound maybe a little bit cliche, but I would really remind myself that I belong here. My first year, I did not feel or believe like I belonged in that spot that I held. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I was doing so much. It's because there was a silent part of me that was really trying to like fit in and really trying to like, be a part of this community that I
Yeah.
felt just so disconnected from. And if I am to like consider it all over again, I think it would be, you know what, you belong and act like I belong because nobody else has this spot but me. So it's just maybe affirming myself more and saying that this is my spot, I deserve this spot, I'm worthy of this spot, I belong here. And because I didn't affirm myself until like very later on. And I wish I would have done that sooner. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, as we close out, what is one piece of advice that you have for prospective or current Black women and non binary doctoral students? I know that you've dropped tons of gems throughout this
Yes.
recording, throughout this episode, but would love to know one final lasting piece of advice that you want to share.
Yes. Activate your activism. Activate your activism. Don't wait for somebody, some committee, some stakeholder to come in there and advocate for you. Advocate for yourself, really going there and be an activist for what you believe in and get the word out. I think when it comes to us, again, as Black minorities, we sometimes feel like the story that we want to tell is so small and so minute. Who is going to care? This isn't big enough to be on their agenda. This isn't big enough to be on their budget. This isn't big enough to be a priority. But sometimes when you speak up and you make it big, it then becomes big for them, because you are part of their ecosystem and you are part of their storytelling as well. So for me, I would say definitely go in there. Don't be afraid to activate your activism and know that, again, there is a sense of belonging. You are part of the ecosystem and your voice matters.
Yeah. You definitely have to send us that picture that you have of yourself
Yes,
next to. I'm like envisioning
absolutely.
it, and I have to see it for myself because I think that is such an amazing
Thank
accomplishment
you so
for,
much.
as you said, for yourself, but also for everyone, Black and non-Black, who is now going to be walking through King's College London, seeing your beautiful, radiant face on the wall and being able to be
Yes.
inspired by that. So definitely send us that picture so that we can share it with our community. And thank you
Oh,
so much,
you're
Dr.
welcome. Look, it's
Gajadhar,
right
for.
here.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, cute. Okay, we need the high res. We need the high res, but
All right,
I'm
I'm gonna
so
send you
glad
the
you
high
made
res.
it. Please do. And thank you so much for joining us today on the Cohort
Thank
Sisters
you so,
podcast. Is
so
there
much.
anything else that you want to share that I might not have covered?
No, that is it. Just to continuously, tell the listeners, go bravely, go bravely, go bravely, go
Yeah.
bravely. You got this, and your next level is already there. Just step into it and go do the damn thing.
Yes, wise words to leave us on. Well, I appreciate your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you
Thank you so
again.
much.
Thank you again for listening to this week's episode of the Cohort Sisters podcast. If you are a Black woman interested in joining the Cohort Sisters membership community, or you're looking for more information on how to support or partner with Cohort Sisters, please visit our website at www.cohortsisters.com. You can also find us on all social media platforms at Cohort Sisters. Don't forget to subscribe to the Cohort Sisters podcast and leave us a quick review wherever you're listening. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and we'll catch you in next week's episode.